Hey, you who are watching this. Where are you watching this video from? Comment your city and take this chance to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because the story you are about to hear will touch your heart in a way you never imagined. This is the true story of Mary and John Peter, which happened right here in New York City, and it will make you question everything about judgment and second chances. The smell of disinfectant mingled with the expensive lavender perfume that permeated every corner of the mansion in the Upper East Side. Mary Sullivan passed a damp cloth over the mahogany table in the living room, with movements as precise and silent as ever. At 26 years old, she carried a sadness that weighed more than the buckets of water she carried up and down the 3 floors of the house every day. "Mary, can you clean the baby's room afterward?" Carlos Williams' voice echoed through the intercom. At 35, the businessman still had deep circles under his eyes that not even his tailored suits could hide. Widowed for only 2 months since Anna died during childbirth, he took refuge in work as if spreadsheets could heal his pain. "Yes, Mr. Williams," Mary replied, swallowing hard. The baby's room. Always the baby's room. She climbed the marble stairs with cautious steps, each one echoing in the silent house. The second-floor hallway smelled of baby powder and that sweet baby perfume that made her chest physically ache. It had been 6 weeks since her own arms had been left empty forever. Rosanna Miller was sitting on the beige velvet armchair, scrolling on her phone, while John Peter slept in the imported oak crib. The 30-year-old nanny, hired through an expensive agency, barely looked up when Mary entered. "Oh, it's you," Rosanna murmured, without taking her eyes off the screen. "Be quiet. The baby just fell asleep." Mary nodded, beginning to organize the tiny clothes in the dresser. Each piece was like a soft stab in her chest. Onesies, bodysuits, tiny socks that fit in the palm of her hand. She remembered the clothes she had bought, still stored in a box under the bed of her small apartment in a Queens neighborhood. John Peter moved in the crib, letting out a small whimper that made Mary's heart race. She instinctively moved closer, but Rosanna quickly stood up. "I'll take care of him," she said dryly. "That's what I'm paid for." "Of course, I'm sorry," Mary murmured, returning to her cleaning task. But something was wrong. The baby was making strange noises, different ones. Mary knew those noises. She had heard them for 3 months until silence had come abruptly and cruelly into her own life. "Rosanna, he's hungry," Mary dared to say. "Of course not. He just ate. But look how he's sucking his hand and those little noises." Rosanna turned to her, her eyes narrowed. "Are you a doctor now? I have a nanny course. You're a cleaner. Stick to your job." Mary lowered her head but continued to discreetly observe John Peter. The baby was clearly hungry, and something deep in her chest, a familiar yet comforting ache, began to throb. From the first floor, the sound of Carlos's voice came through the phone. "Yes, the report is ready. No, there are no problems here at home." But there were. Mary could feel it. Rosanna sat back down and grabbed her phone, completely ignoring John Peter's increasingly restless sounds. It was as if she couldn't, or didn't want to, hear what was so obvious to Mary, that baby needed attention, and he needed it now. Mary finished cleaning, but she couldn't leave the room. Something was keeping her there, an invisible force that came from a very deep and painful place in her heart. How could she have imagined that in a few hours, her entire life would change forever? It was 3 in the afternoon when it started. John Peter's cries cut through the air of the mansion, like an emergency siren, high-pitched and desperate. Mary was on the ground floor, vacuuming in the living room, when the sound hit her like a punch to the stomach. She instinctively turned off the vacuum cleaner and looked up, all her attention focused on that cry for help. Her breasts, which still produced milk after the loss of her own child, responded immediately to the call, tingling and heavy. "Rosanna!" Carlos's voice echoed through the intercom. "What's wrong with John Peter?" Silence. "Rosanna!" Mary ran up the stairs, finding the hallway empty. The baby's room door was ajar, and inside, John Peter was crying alone in the crib, his face red from effort, his little fists clenched. "Rosanna!" Mary called, but there was no answer. She checked the suite's bathroom, the walk-in closet, the balcony. Nothing. The nanny had simply vanished, leaving a 2-month-old baby crying alone. On the first floor, Carlos was in his office with the door closed, talking loudly on the phone. "No, we can't accept less than 15 million. It's our final offer." Mary went back to the room and picked up John Peter, rocking him gently. "Shh, little one. It's okay," she murmured, but the baby continued to cry, clearly hungry. She went to the kitchen to get his bottle. She found one on the counter, But when she tested the temperature, she made a face of disgust. The milk was sour, probably abandoned there for hours in the New York heat. "Oh my God," she whispered, pouring the spoiled milk down the sink. She quickly prepared a new bottle, but John Peter rejected it, pushing the nipple away with his tongue and crying even harder. Mary tried everything, walking with him, rubbing his back, singing softly, but nothing worked. Carlos appeared in the kitchen, his suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled. "Where the hell is Rosanna?" "I don't know, Mr. Williams. When I went upstairs, she wasn't there." "What do you mean she wasn't there? She can't just disappear." John Peter's crying increased in volume, and Carlos ran his hands through his hair, visibly frustrated. "I need this video conference. It's a $20 million deal." He left the kitchen, but Mary could hear him pacing in the living room, trying to feign professionalism on the phone while the baby's cries echoed throughout the house. "Yes, of course, we can discuss the term. No noise issues here." Mary looked at John Peter, who was turning purple from crying so much. She knew that kind of crying. It was pure desperation. The baby was hungry, probably dehydrated, and nothing she offered was working. Her breasts ached. Milk was letting down, soaking her blouse. It was as if her body knew exactly what this creature needed, even as her mind fought against the idea. "No, I can't," she whispered to herself. That would be... But John Peter's cries increased again, now weaker, more desperate. He was losing strength. Mary looked around. Carlos was still feigning normalcy on the phone. Rosanna had vanished without explanation, and there, in her arms, a baby who desperately needed to be fed. She made the decision that would change everything. With trembling hands, she sat down on the kitchen chair, opened her blouse, and brought John Peter to her breast. The baby stopped crying instantly, as if a switch had been flipped, and began to suckle with a desperate hunger. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Mary closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 6 weeks, she felt useful again. She felt like a mother. It was in that moment of absolute silence that she heard Carlos's footsteps approaching the kitchen. Carlos stopped in the kitchen doorway, as if he had been shot. Mary looked up, meeting his shocked gaze. For a moment that seemed eternal. Neither of them said anything. John Peter was still suckling peacefully, small sounds of satisfaction escaping from his mouth. "What? What are you doing?" Carlos's voice came out choked. "He was hungry, Mr. Williams. The bottle was sour, he rejected the new one, and Rosanna disappeared." Mary tried to keep her voice calm, but her hands were shaking. "He had been crying for 3 hours." 3 hours? Carlos looked at the watch on his wrist. "But I was in the meeting." "I know. You were working." Carlos slowly approached, watching his son. John Peter was visibly calmer, his pink cheeks moving to the rhythm of his sucking, his little eyes relaxed. He's never been so quiet," Carlos murmured, almost to himself. "Babies know when they need something specific," Mary said softly. "Sometimes it's not just the milk. It's the affection, the connection." Carlos's phone rang. He answered automatically. "Hello, Sandra. Hi, neighbor." His expression gradually changed as he listened. "What do you mean you saw it from the window?" "Oh, I see. No, of course. Thanks for letting me know." He hung up and looked at Mary with a different expression, colder. "Sandra, from 2B, says she saw something weird going on in my kitchen." Mary felt the blood run cold in her veins. Other calls started coming in. Mrs. Fatima from 3C, Mrs. Newser from the ground floor, all the neighbors in the building, all with the same message. "Carlos, you have to be careful. That girl could be taking advantage of the situation. Where is the official nanny, Carlos? Why are you letting the cleaner do that? She might be trying to take the place of your late wife." With each call, Carlos's face became more closed off. Mary watched as distrust grew in his eyes like a dark cloud. John Peter finished suckling and fell asleep in her arms, completely relaxed for the first time since she had known him. "Mary," Carlos said, his voice now completely professional, "can you explain what happened to me better?" She told him everything, finding the empty room, the sour bottle, the baby's desperation, her own desperate decision. She talked about the loss of her own son, how she still produced milk, and how she couldn't bear to see a child suffer. Carlos listened to her in silence, but Mary could see that he was torn between what he saw, his son finally at peace, and what he was hearing from the neighbors on the phone. Rosanna chose that moment to reappear, coming in through the back door with several shopping bags. "Hello, sorry, I went to buy that special imported milk that John Peter needs." Wow, what a nice silence. Did he stop crying? She stopped abruptly when she saw the scene in the kitchen. What? What's going on here? Mary tried to explain, but Rosanna interrupted her, indignant. What did you do, Carlos? This is absurd. She can't just take the baby and do that. It's an invasion of privacy. It's inappropriate. Rosanna paused dramatically. It's dangerous. Dangerous in what way? Carlos asked. Well, what if she has a disease? What if she's trying to create a forced bond with the baby? I've seen cases like this, Carlos. Women who lost children and become obsessed with other babies. It's a syndrome. It has a scientific name and everything. Mary felt as if she had been slapped. I was just trying to help. Help? Rosanna laughed with disdain. You were taking advantage of a moment of vulnerability to infiltrate the family. It's very convenient, isn't it? You lose a child and suddenly a baby from a rich family appears needing attention. That's not it, Mary whispered, but her voice came out weak. Carlos took John Peter from her arms. The baby protested a little but didn't cry. Mary, he said, his voice now completely professional, I need to think about this. Maybe it's better if you go home today. We'll talk tomorrow. But Mary knew from his tone, from the way he avoided her gaze, from the neighbors' calls that still echoed in her mind, that there would be no tomorrow. She grabbed her purse and left through the back door, hearing Rosanna say loud enough for her to hear, "You did the right thing, Carlos. Desperate people do desperate things. It's better to be careful." On the street, Mary leaned against the building wall and cried. She didn't know yet that this would be only the first of many tears she would shed in the coming months. Inside the house, John Peter started to cry again. No references, I can't hire her. Mary heard that phrase 17 times in 2 weeks. 17 houses in Manhattan and the Hamptons where she knocked on the door, 17 polite but firm no's. Carlos had refused to give her a letter of recommendation. "Given the circumstances of your departure, I think it's more prudent not to take a position," was all he said when she called, begging. Sitting on a bench in a city park, Mary counted the coins she had left in her wallet. $23.50. The rent for her apartment was due in 3 days. Her phone rang. It was Mark, her ex-husband. "Mary, I heard you got fired. How did you hear?" "New York is a small town for certain news. Rosanna is a cousin of a colleague of mine at work. She told me you went crazy at your boss's house." "I didn't go crazy, Mark. I saved a child who was starving." "Yeah, right? Just like you saved our relationship when you got obsessed with having kids?" Mary closed her eyes. Mark always knew exactly where to hurt her the most. "What do you want?" "Nothing. I just wanted to make sure you weren't going to look for me to ask for money, because I don't have any. And even if I did..." He hung up without finishing the sentence. 3 days later, Mary was on the street. The apartment was padlocked by the landlord. Her belongings, a small suitcase with clothes and the box with the baby clothes that were never used, went to a storage unit she didn't have money to pay for. The first night was the hardest. She tried to sleep on a park bench, but the rain started at 2 in the morning. She sought shelter under the awning of a pharmacy, curled up and trembling. First time on the street, Mary looked up. A man in his 50s, with a grey beard and ragged but clean clothes, was standing beside her. "Tom," he introduced himself. "And you're in the wrong place. The police patrol here every hour. Come on, I know a better spot." She hesitated. "Look, girl, you can trust me or you can stay here and get woken up with a nightstick. Your choice." Tom led her under a bridge where a small community of homeless people had set up. There was Mrs. Connie, who took care of 3 cats, Michael, a former banker who lost everything to addiction, and Lucy, a young mother with a 5-year-old girl. "Everyone here has a story," Tom explained as Mary settled down on a piece of cardboard. "Yours seems recent. Do you want to tell it?" Mary told him. Everything. The loss of her baby, the job at Carlos's house, the moment with John Peter, the humiliation, the firing without references. "You did the right thing," Tom said simply, "and that's why you're here. The world is a bitch, the truth is." Mrs. Connie brought her a can of sardines and some bread she had gotten from a bakery. "Eat, honey. Down here we share everything." In the following days, Mary learned the rules of the street, where to get food, where to use a bathroom, where it was safe to sleep, how to avoid police raids. She learned to beg without looking people in the eye, because the shame in others' gazes hurt more than hunger. But the worst was at night, when silence came, and she thought about John Peter. Was he okay? Was he crying again? Was Rosanna taking good care of him? A week later, Mary developed a persistent cough. Tom took her to the neighborhood health center where she was diagnosed with pneumonia. "You need rest and medication," the doctor said. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Mary looked at Tom, who shook his head. "We don't have any spots at the shelter today," the doctor continued, "but you can try again tomorrow morning." They returned under the bridge. Mary was weak, feverish, losing weight quickly. That night, delirious with fever, she would call out for John Peter. "Shh, little one," she would murmur in the darkness. "Mommy's here." Tom stayed awake by her side, making compresses with cloths soaked in cold water from the park fountain. "You'll get through this," he promised. "You'll get through this and you'll be reunited with that child, I know it." But Mary was disappearing, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Each day on the street wore her down more, as if she were being slowly erased from existence. On the other side of the city, in the Upper East Side mansion, John Peter was also disappearing in a different way. "He won't eat anything," said Dr. Henry, closing John Peter's medical chart at the hospital. "We've already tried different formulas, different methods. He even rejected the feeding tube." Carlos held his son in his arms, feeling how light, how fragile he had become. John Peter cried constantly, but it was a different cry than the hungry one he remembered. It was a cry of surrender. But he's only 3 months old. How can he have psychological trauma? "Babies are more sensitive than we imagine," Dr. Henry explained. "They form specific bonds, especially when they go through stressful situations." John Peter associated feeding and comfort with a specific person. When that person disappeared from his life, "Mary," Carlos murmured. "Pardon?" "Nothing, go on." When there was this abrupt break, the baby may have developed what we call anaclitic depression. It's rare, but it happens. He's rejecting bonds because the last one was traumatic. Carlos thought about the last 3 weeks. Rosanna had tried everything, but John Peter systematically rejected any attempt at feeding. 3 different nannies had come through the house. None had managed to get him to eat more than a few spoonfuls of puree. "Doctor, what if I bring that person back? The mother?" "No, the mother died in childbirth, but there was a caregiver, a person he became attached to." Dr. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Do you know where she is?" Carlos lowered his head. "No." In reality, he knew he had fired Mary without references. He knew she was probably unemployed, but he didn't imagine the rest. That night, while John Peter slept restlessly in the hospital room, Carlos stayed awake, thinking. The words of the neighbors echoed in his mind, but now they sounded different, more empty, more cruel. She could be taking advantage of the situation, but Mary didn't ask for anything. She didn't ask for money, a promotion, or recognition. She simply fed a hungry child. Desperate people do desperate things. But was what Mary did desperate? Or was it what any mother would do? The next day, Carlos confronted Rosanna. "Where were you that afternoon?" "When John Peter cried for 3 hours." Rosanna hesitated. I went out to buy the special milk I told you." "At which pharmacy?" "Pharmacy? You said you went to buy special milk. Which pharmacy?" It was at a mall, in Soho." "Rosanna, John Peter's special milk is only sold in compounding pharmacies, and the closest one is on Park Avenue, not at the Soho Mall." Rosanna's face turned red. "Where were you really?" "Okay," she exploded. "I went to the mall, all right? I needed a break. Taking care of a baby is very stressful, and you have no idea what it's like to be trapped in that house all day. You abandoned a 2-month-old baby for 3 hours to go shopping." "I didn't abandon him. I knew Mary was downstairs. She loves to mess with the kids. She's always hanging around. I thought she could watch him for a bit." Carlos felt a wave of anger and understanding at the same time. "So you knew he'd be with her?" "Of course. And you know what else? That woman is crazy about your son. Every time she cleans his room, she gets that dreamy, half-obsessed look. I come from the best families in Manhattan, Carlos. I know how to recognize when someone is plotting something." "What families?" "Well, my family." "What's your full last name, Rosanna?" She hesitated again. "Rosanna Miller Smith." "Rosanna, your work ID says Rosanna Miller, and you live in a public housing complex in the Bronx. What best families in Manhattan are those?" You lied about everything, didn't you? About your references, about your experience, about that day, and on top of that, you spread gossip about Mary to cover up your lies." Rosanna started to cry, but they were tears of rage, not of remorse. "You don't get it. That woman was going to take my place. She lost a child and she was latching onto yours. I was protecting you both." "Protecting us from what?" "From someone who fed my son when he was starving. She wanted to be part of the family. I saw it in her eyes." Carlos looked at Rosanna and saw for the first time what was really happening. Jealousy. Pure and simple professional jealousy from a woman who saw another person doing the job that should be hers and doing it better. "You're fired," he said calmly. "You'll regret this," Rosanna shouted, grabbing her purse. "You'll see. That woman will come back and ruin your life. She'll take everything from you." She slammed the door on her way out. Carlos was left alone in the hospital waiting room, looking at his son through the glass. John Peter was sleeping, but even in his sleep he seemed restless, unhappy. It was time to find Mary. Carlos had never really noticed how many homeless people there were in New York City. Now, searching for Mary for 5 days, they seemed to be on every corner, under every bridge, in every park in the city. He started with the obvious places: shelters downtown, the health center in Greenwich Village, charitable organizations. Nothing. He hired a private detective, who also found no trace. "Mr. Williams," the investigator told him over the phone, "without documents or an updated work ID, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. New York has over 50,000 homeless people. 50,000. Carlos had never thought about that number. On the 6th day, he decided to look himself. He put on simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, and went out into the city center. The East Village was the first place. He walked the streets, trying not to show his shock at what he saw. People lying on the sidewalks, others clearly under the influence of drugs, the strong smell of urine and garbage. "Do you know a woman named Mary?" he asked different people. "Mary Sullivan, around 26. Empty stares, negative responses, some requests for money. He went through the Times Square area, through Chelsea, through the Lower East Side. In each place, the same routine: show a photo of Mary, which he had saved from her employee file, ask questions, receive no's. On the 7th day, exhausted and about to give up, Carlos was walking under a bridge when he heard someone call him. "Hey, boss." He turned. A man in his 50s, gray beard, was approaching. "You're Carlos, right? John Peter's dad?" Carlos felt his heart race. "You know Mary?" "Yes, I know her." "Tom, nice to meet you." The man extended his hand. "Mary talks about you a lot, and about the kid. Where is she? Is she okay?" Tom looked at him intently for a long moment, as if he were evaluating something. "She's alive. More than that. Well, it depends on what you call okay. Please, I need to see her. My son is in the hospital. He won't eat, he won't sleep, he won't stop crying. The doctor says he might have trauma from losing her. And now you want her back?" The question came without judgment, but Carlos felt its weight. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I listened to the wrong people, I was afraid of the wrong things, and I fired the only person who truly cared about my son." Tom nodded slowly. "She's sick, Carlos. Pneumonia. She's been like this for 2 weeks, losing weight, getting weaker. Sometimes she's delirious with fever and calls out for her baby." Carlos felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Pneumonia? Why? Where is she sleeping? Where do you think she's sleeping? Oh my God. Yeah, God. Because only a miracle explains how she hasn't died of cold or been assaulted." Carlos ran his hands through his hair, desperate. "Take me to her, please. Are you sure? It's not pretty what you're about to see. And there's no point in you showing up there offering her handouts. Mary has pride, a lot of pride. I'm not going to offer her handouts. I'm going to offer her an apology, and her job back if she wants it." Tom studied his face for a moment longer. "Let's go then. But be prepared, because the woman you're going to find is not the same one you fired." They walked to the spot under the bridge, where a small community stretched out between cardboards and tarps. Carlos saw Mrs. Connie, who pretended not to notice him, and Lucy, who held her daughter closer as he passed. "There," Tom pointed to a darker corner. Carlos approached slowly. Mary was sleeping, wrapped in a thin, dirty blanket. She was very thin, her face pale and stained, her hair matted and lifeless. She coughed even in her sleep. "Mary!" he called softly. She opened her eyes slowly, as if it were an effort to focus. When she recognized him, her expression wasn't one of joy or surprise. It was one of pure humiliation. "No," she murmured, trying to cover herself more. "No, you can't be here. Mary, I need to talk to you. Go away. John Peter is in the hospital." She stopped moving. "What did you say?" "John Peter. He's been admitted. He won't eat, he won't sleep. The doctor says it's emotional trauma. He's dying, Mary." She slowly sat up, and Carlos could see tears forming in her eyes. But Rosanna. Rosanna's gone. I found out she lied about everything. About that day, about her qualifications, about you." Mary looked at him for a long time, and Carlos saw something break in her expression. It wasn't relief, it was rage. "Now you find out," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "After I lost everything, after I ended up here. Now you find out I was telling the truth. I know, and I'm so sorry." You're sorry? Mary stood up, swaying but determined. You humiliated me. You fired me without references. You let those gossiping neighbors call me crazy, a user. You threw me out on the street, Carlos. I know. And now, because your son is sick, you come looking for me. Carlos lowered his head. Yes. The brutal honesty of the answer seemed to disarm Mary for a moment. At least you didn't lie, she murmured. She coughed violently, and Tom came closer with a bottle of water. Mary, you need to go to the hospital. Both of you. You and the baby. Mary looked at Carlos, then at Tom, and back at Carlos. If I go with you, she said slowly, it's not because I've forgiven you. It's for John Peter. Only for him. I understand. And I don't trust you. Not ever again. I understand that too. Mary picked up a plastic bag with her few belongings. Let's go then, before I change my mind. The hospital had never seemed so welcoming to Carlos as it did that morning. Mary was immediately admitted for pneumonia treatment, and through a conversation with Dr. Henry, it was arranged for her and John Peter to stay on the same floor. It's unorthodox, the doctor admitted, but if there's a real emotional connection between them, it could be therapeutic for both of them. Mary was on an IV, medicated and on oxygen, but her eyes remained alert in the direction of John Peter's room. How is he? She asked for the 10th time in 2 hours. The same, Carlos replied, crying, refusing food, losing weight. And the tests? Physically, he's fine. It's emotional. Mary closed her eyes, and Carlos saw tears stream down her face. I shouldn't have gone away from him. Mary, you didn't go away. You were fired. It's the same thing. He's a baby. He doesn't understand explanations. He only understands that I disappeared. Dr. Henry entered the room, carrying John Peter, who was crying weakly in his arms. He's even rejecting the tube, the doctor said, worried. Mary, do you feel up to trying? Mary tried to sit up in bed, but she was too weak. Carlos helped her get comfortable, placing pillows behind her back. Dr. Henry placed John Peter in her arms. What happened next was as if someone had turned on a light that had been off for weeks. John Peter stopped crying immediately. He opened his small eyes and looked directly at Mary, as if he were confirming that she was real. Then he gave something that looked like a smile, the first smile anyone had seen from him since Mary had left his life. Hello, little one, Mary whispered, her voice choked. Hello, my love. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. John Peter started making small sounds of satisfaction, those happy baby noises that Carlos had almost forgotten existed. He's smiling, Dr. Henry murmured, taking notes. It's remarkable. Mary opened her hospital gown and brought John Peter to her breast. The baby latched on immediately and began to suckle with a desperate hunger, as if he were making up for weeks of food refusal. Carlos stepped back, giving them privacy, but he couldn't stop watching. The relief on Mary's face, John Peter's obvious satisfaction, the way the two of them seemed to complement each other. How do you explain this? He asked the doctor. Bond, Dr. Henry replied simply. It's not about biology. It's about emotional connection. For this baby, this woman represents security, nourishment, love. When she disappeared, his world fell apart. John Peter fell asleep, suckling, completely relaxed for the first time in weeks. Mary, Carlos said in a low voice. Would you come back home, with me and with him? Mary didn't answer immediately. She kept stroking John Peter's head, pensive. Under what conditions? She finally asked. You choose. I want a contract in writing with all my rights guaranteed. Done. I want you to tell those gossiping neighbors exactly what happened. I want them to know they were wrong. Done. And I want it to be clear that I don't trust you. It will be a long time before I trust you again. Carlos swallowed hard. I understand. I'm doing this for John Peter, only for him. I know. And if you let me down again, I'll leave, and this time I'll take him with me. You can't. Mary looked at him with a hardness he had never seen before. Yes, I can, because this time I'll have a lawyer, and witnesses, and a medical history that proves he needs me to survive. The threat hung in the air between them. You wouldn't do that, Carlos said, but without much conviction. Are you sure? Mary asked. You were also sure of my character when you fired me. Carlos realized that the woman in whose arms his son was sleeping peacefully was different from the Mary he had known. Harder, more astute, more willing to fight. The street had taught her some lessons she wouldn't soon forget. Okay, he finally said. Your conditions. All of them. Then let's go home, Mary said, kissing John Peter's forehead. Let's go home, little one. But the house now would be a very different place for all of them. 6 months later, The mansion on the Upper East Side had a completely different rhythm. Mary woke up every day at 6 in the morning, not to clean the house, but to prepare breakfast for John Peter, who at 8 months was a plump, smiling baby. Carlos came down to the kitchen at the same time every day, 7:15, and found Mary humming softly, while John Peter ate his puree in the high chair. "Good morning," he would say, like every day. "Good morning," she would reply, cordial but distant. The conversation between them rarely went beyond practical topics about John Peter. Carlos had learned not to force intimacy. Mary had made it clear that they were not a family in the traditional sense. They were two people who loved the same child and had found a functional way to care for him together. The contract she demanded was drafted by the best employment lawyer Carlos knew. Mary had a specialized nanny salary, a permanent contract, health insurance, food bonuses, and a specific clause that guaranteed she could not be fired without a just cause proven in court. "Isn't that a bit exaggerated?" Carlos had commented to the lawyer. "Considering she could sue you for discriminatory firing based on the first experience, I'd say she's being generous," was the response. It took the neighbors in the building a while to adapt to the new dynamic. Carlos kept his promise to tell the truth about what had happened, publishing a detailed message on the community's WhatsApp group. Some people in this group spread malicious gossip about Mary, my employee, which resulted in a terrible injustice. "I want to make it clear that Mary saved my son from starvation and almost died on the street because of the prejudices you planted in my head. I ask you to reflect on how hasty judgments can destroy lives." The message sparked controversy. Sandra, from 2B, tried to defend herself. "I was only trying to protect you, Carlos." His response was dry. "Protect me from what?" "From someone who cared for my son better than I was doing myself." Slowly, the gossip subsided. Mary walked around the building with John Peter in the stroller, polite but reserved with everyone. Some neighbors tried to start conversations, but she kept interactions to the bare minimum. "She really won't forgive me," Sandra commented to Mrs. Fatima in the elevator. "And why should she?" Mrs. Fatima replied, to Sandra's surprise. "If it were me, I would have sued all of you." The house's routine settled naturally. Carlos worked during the day, but now he made sure to eat lunch at home whenever possible to spend time with John Peter. At night, after the baby fell asleep, he and Mary would meet in the living room to talk about the day, plan the next week, or resolve practical matters. They were civilized conversations, sometimes even cordial, but always with an invisible barrier between them. Mary never forgot who he was and what he had done. "The pediatrician says John Peter is developing perfectly," Carlos commented one of those nights. "Yes, Dr. Henry was impressed with his weight gain." "Mary, yes? Are you happy here?" The question took her by surprise. She studied him for a long moment. "Happy is a complicated word," she finally said. "I have a job that satisfies me, a roof over my head, and I can take care of a child I love. It's more than I had 6 months ago." "That doesn't answer my question." "It's the only answer you're going to get." Carlos nodded, accepting once again the limits she imposed. Mary's phone rang. It was Tom. "Hi, Tom. How are you?" Her voice instantly livened up. Carlos watched her talk to her friend from the street, telling him about John Peter, asking about Mrs. Connie and the others. When she hung up, her smile gradually faded, returning to the neutral expression she maintained in Carlos's presence. "How is he?" Carlos asked. "Good. He got a job at a cleaning company. He's off the street." "That's great." "Yes. People can start over when someone gives them a chance." The phrase had an obvious weight, but Carlos didn't comment. John Peter woke up crying, and Mary went to get him. Carlos followed her to the bedroom door and stood there, watching her calm the baby with a lullaby she had made up. "Sleep, little one, for Mummy's here. Sleep peacefully, for nothing will harm you. Daddy loves you too, in his own way. We're a strange family, but we're your nest." Carlos felt a knot in his chest. A strange family. That's what they were. John Peter fell back asleep, and Mary gently put him in the crib. "Mary," Carlos whispered. Do you think someday you'll be able to forgive me?" She was silent for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. "I don't know," she finally said. "I really don't know." It was the most honest answer she had given him, and in some ways that gave Carlos the first spark of hope he had felt in months. Maybe a strange family was still a family. It was a rainy Tuesday when Mark showed up at the mansion's door. Mary was bathing John Peter in the bathroom tub when the intercom rang. "There's a man here who says he's Mary's husband," Carlos told her over the internal phone. Mary's heart stopped for a second. "Ex-husband," she automatically corrected. She quickly dressed John Peter and went downstairs with him in her arms, finding Mark in the living room, looking around with an expression between envy and disdain. "Well, Mary, you've done pretty well for yourself, huh? What do you want, Mark? Can't I visit my ex-wife?" He smiled, but it was a smile she knew well, the smile that came before the words that hurt. Carlos was standing near the stairs, not sure whether he should leave or stay. "Carlos, this is Mark," Mary said, her voice tense. "Mark, this is Carlos, my boss." "Boss," Mark repeated, as if he were testing the word. "Funny, it doesn't look like a boss-employee relationship." "What do you mean by that?" Carlos asked. "Well, the way you look at each other, how she treats you. Mary has always been very good at winning over men when she needs something." Mary felt her face burn. "Get out of here, Mark. Relax, honey, I'm just making an observation." He moved closer to John Peter. "What a cute baby. He looks so much like you when you hold him like that, almost as if he were your own son. Mark, remember when you got obsessed with having a baby? How desperate you were when we lost ours." Carlos moved involuntarily, and Mary saw something change in his expression. "Now you have your baby, right? And a rich boss who supports you. Perfect." "Enough," Carlos said, stepping forward. "I think it's better if you leave." "Why? Can't I talk to my ex-wife?" "Ex-wife who you abandoned when she needed you most," Carlos said, and Mary looked at him in surprise. "Oh, she told you her side of the story?" Mark laughed. "Let me tell you mine. Mary got pregnant after begging me for years. When she lost the baby, she blamed me as if it were my fault. She got depressed, paranoid, obsessed with other people's babies. I had to leave home because she was drowning our marriage." "That's not how it was," Mary said in a low voice. "No? Didn't you start following pregnant women on the street? Didn't you spend hours looking at baby clothes in stores? Didn't you cry every time you saw a diaper commercial on TV?" Mary held John Peter tighter. Those things were true, but Mark was telling them in a way that made them sound sick. "And now look, you found a motherless baby and a rich, lonely father. What a convenient coincidence." "Get out of here," Mary said, her voice trembling. "Mary's right," Carlos said. "You have to leave." "And you," Mark turned to Carlos. "Are you sure you know the woman who lives in your house? The one who takes care of your son?" "Yes, I know her." "Do you really know her? Do you know she's made up stories about bosses before? That she's been fired from other jobs for inappropriate behavior?" "That's not true," Mary said, but her voice came out weak. "No? What about that family on Park Avenue, the Montenegros? Didn't they fire you because you got obsessed with their son?" Mary closed her eyes. There had been a job, years ago, where she had become too attached to a child, but it wasn't how Mark was telling it. "You're twisting everything," she murmured. "Am I, Carlos? Why don't you call the Montenegros and ask them about Mary? Their number must be on her work ID." Carlos looked at Mary, who was clearly distraught. "I don't need to call anyone," he finally said. "No? No, because I already made the mistake of believing gossip once, and I almost destroyed her life because of it." Mark seemed momentarily disarmed. "I've seen Mary care for my son," Carlos continued. "I saw the genuine love in her eyes. I saw how John Peter responds to her. And I saw how she almost died on the street because of people like you, who twist the truth to hurt." "Carlos," Mary said in a low voice. "No, Mary. It's my turn now." He turned to Mark. "I don't know what kind of man abandons his wife when she's grieving the loss of a child, but I know what kind of man shows up months later to try to destroy the new life she's built. You don't know me? I don't need to know you, I know the type." Carlos opened the front door. "And now you're leaving and never coming back." "Mary," Mark said, ignoring Carlos. "You know I'm right. You know you're fooling yourself, pretending this baby is yours. One day you'll wake up and realize you're living a fantasy." "Get out," Mary yelled, waking John Peter, who started to cry. Mark left, but he stopped at the door. "When this fantasy is over, don't come looking for me," he said before leaving. Carlos closed the door and turned to Mary, who was trembling, trying to calm John Peter. "Hey," he said softly. "Breathe. He's gone. He twisted everything. But some things he said were true," Mary admitted, still trembling. "What's the truth about the Montenegros?" Mary sat down on the couch, rocking John Peter, until he calmed down. "I worked there for 6 months. They had a 2-year-old boy, Raphael. I got very attached to him. When I was fired, I cried. I cried a lot. But it wasn't an obsession, Carlos. It was love. Genuine love for a child." "Why were you fired?" "Because they realized that Raphael preferred being with me than with them. They felt threatened." Carlos nodded. "And the obsession with babies after you lost yours?" Mary was silent for a long time. "It was true," she finally admitted. I would stare at babies on the street, yes. I would cry at commercials, yes. But Carlos, I had lost a child. I was grieving. I was trying to process the pain. And Mark didn't help you. He said I was being dramatic, that I needed to get over it already. When I needed support the most, he abandoned me. Carlos sat down beside her on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. Mary, do you want to know the truth? I called the Montenegros. She looked at him, surprised. When? 3 months ago, right after you came back. And what did they tell you? They said you were an exemplary employee, that their son adored you, and that they fired you because his wife got jealous of the connection between you two. Mary felt tears in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I realized you needed to tell me in your own time. You needed to trust me enough to share your vulnerabilities. They were silent for a moment. John Peter asleep peacefully on Mary's lap. Carlos. Yes, thank you for defending me, for believing in me. You're welcome. This doesn't mean I've forgiven you, she said, but her voice was softer. I know. But it's a start. Carlos smiled for the first time in months. A start was more than he had hoped for. Are you sure you want to do this? Carlos asked, watching Mary review the script on the tablet. They were in the green room of a morning talk show, waiting to record an interview with the host. Their story had gone viral on social media after a neighbor in the building shared Carlos's message in a mother's group, and from there, it spread until it reached the show's producers. No, Mary answered honestly, but I think it's important. How many other women go through what I went through? How many others are judged by class prejudices? John Peter was sleeping in the stroller beside her, oblivious to the movement of the set. Mary Sullivan and Carlos Williams, the producer, appeared at the door. Are you ready? On set, the host greeted them with her characteristic style, direct but welcoming. Folks, this story has touched me, she began, looking at the cameras. Mary, you're a woman who lost her own child and saved another baby from starvation, but was punished for it. How did we get to this point? Mary took a deep breath before answering. I think the problem is that in America, we still have a lot of class prejudices. When a household employee does something that should be natural, caring for a child in danger, it's seen as suspicious. But Carlos, you also let yourself be influenced by that prejudice, didn't you? Carlos shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Yes, I let myself be influenced by the opinions of the neighbors who saw malice where there was only maternal love. And I almost destroyed 2 lives because of it. Those neighbors who called you complaining? Exactly. They saw an employee breastfeeding a baby from the window and immediately thought the worst. They didn't think it was an emergency, that it was necessary. The host turned to Mary. And you, after all that, you went back to work for him. I went back for John Peter, Mary said, looking at the baby sleeping peacefully. He got sick when I left his life. He was wasting away. A 3-month-old baby developed depression because he lost his mother figure. Folks, do you have photos of John Peter from that time? Carlos showed a photo on his phone that was projected on the big screen. John Peter looked thin, crying, clearly weakened. Wow, the host exclaimed. And when Mary came back? Another photo. John Peter plump and smiling in Mary's arms. The difference is impressive. Dr. Henry, who is a pediatrician at the hospital, is here with us via video call. Doctor, is this common? Look, babies can develop what we call anaclitic depression when there's an abrupt break in the emotional bond. John Peter's case is one of the most dramatic I've seen. And today, how are they? Carlos and Mary looked at each other. We're learning, Mary replied. Learning to be a non-traditional family. I still don't completely trust Carlos, and he knows that. I deserve that distrust, Carlos admitted. I hope to regain her trust someday. And love. Is there love between you two? The question took them both by surprise. Love for John Peter, no doubt, Mary said carefully. Love between us? That's more complicated. Carlos. I admire Mary very much. She's an incredible mother to John Peter. As for the rest, he hesitated. We're building it day by day. Do you intend to get married? No, Mary answered too quickly. I mean, it's not something we're considering right now. The host smiled. Well, from what I see here, you're very fond of each other, even if you won't admit it. During the commercial break, Mary whispered to Carlos, why did she ask that question about marriage? Because it's television. They want a romantic happy ending. Our story isn't a romantic happy ending, isn't it? Mary looked at him, then at John Peter. Our story is about second chances, about how people can grow, about how love for a child can heal wounds between adults. That sounds like a happy ending to me. A different kind of happy ending, then. When they came back from the break, the host had a surprise. Folks, we've received hundreds of messages from people who identify with your story. There are mothers who have gone through similar situations, bosses who have reconsidered their attitudes. Do you want to read some? The messages appeared on the big screen. I also lost a baby and I know how hard it is to deal with people's judgment. You go, Mary. Carlos, you had the courage to admit your mistakes publicly. That's rare. My employee also loves my kids and I've always seen that as a positive thing, not a negative one. Mary started to cry. I'm sorry, she said. It's the first time I feel like people have really understood what happened. And there's more, the host said. We got in touch with the neighbors who spread the gossip. They wanted to send a message. A video started playing. Sandra from 2B appeared on screen. Mary, I want to publicly apologize to you. I misjudged the situation and contributed to a terrible injustice. I hope you can forgive me. Other neighbors appeared with similar messages. Mary dried her tears. I didn't expect this. And there's one more surprise, the host said. Tom, who helped Mary when she was on the street, is here. Tom appeared on the set, looking sharp in a simple but well-pressed suit. Tom, Mary stood up and hugged him. Hi, honey. I came to see you shine on TV. How are you? How did you get such a nice suit? I got a job, remember? And the company's social worker helped me get an apartment through the housing program. Carlos approached and extended his hand. Thank you for taking care of her when I failed. Tom shook his hand. I just did what any decent person would do. Tom, the host asked, what did you think of Mary when you met her on the street? I thought she was a woman who had lost everything because of prejudice. But I also thought she was a strong woman who would get back on her feet again. And she did. She did. And she lifted others up with her. At the end of the show, the host summarized, Folks, this story teaches us that hasty judgments can destroy lives, but also that it's possible to rebuild, to ask for forgiveness, and to create something new. Mary, Carlos, and John Peter are a different family, but they are a real family. Leaving the set, Mary said to Carlos, I think it was important to do this. Why? Because now our story isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to all the people who identified with us, and that gives me hope. Hope for what? That things can change, that people can learn. Carlos smiled. And us? Can we learn too? Mary looked at him for a long moment. I think we already are. Are you sure you want to have a party? Mary asked for the third time, arranging the decorations on the living room table. John Peter's first birthday was on Saturday, and Carlos had insisted on a party at home. Nothing over the top, just close family and a few friends. The problem was that they didn't have much close family, and their circles of friends were completely different. I'm sure, Carlos replied, hanging blue and yellow balloons. He deserves a celebration. He's not going to remember any of this, but we will. Mary smiled discreetly. Carlos was right. The first birthday was more for the adults than for the child. John Peter was in the playpen, playing with colored blocks, oblivious to the movement around him. At 12 months, he was a chubby, smiling baby with his father's curly hair and a smile that lit up any room. Who exactly is coming? Mary asked, checking the list. My parents are coming from Boston. My sister Paula with her husband Tom. Mrs. Connie if she can get out of the shelter. Dr. Henry said he might stop by. And on my side? Carlos stopped what he was doing. Didn't you invite anyone? I don't have a lot of people to invite. It was true. Mary had lost touch with most of her friends during her marriage to Mark. After the separation and the months on the street, her social circle had shrunk dramatically. Are you sure? No cousins, old co-workers? Carlos, most of the people I knew judged me when they found out about my story. The few who didn't, well, I don't know if they would feel comfortable in a house like this. Carlos understood. There were two very different worlds meeting there. The doorbell rang. It was Paula, Carlos's sister, arriving with her husband Richard and a pile of gifts. Where's my nephew? Paula exclaimed, going directly to John Peter, who held out his little arms to her. Hi, Paula, Mary said, a little tense. Paula and Mary had only seen each other twice since she came back to work in the house. Conversations were always cordial, but Mary felt that Paula was constantly evaluating her, trying to understand exactly what her role was in Carlos's and John Peter's lives. Mary, you look fantastic, Paula said, kissing her on the cheek. And John Peter, wow, how he's grown. He's in the 90th percentile for weight and height, Mary replied automatically. You sound like a proud mom, Richard commented, and there was a strange, momentary silence. Carlos arrived with his parents, Mrs. Eleanor and Mr. Joe, a middle-class couple from Boston, who were clearly still trying to understand their son's unusual situation. "Mary, dear," Mrs. Eleanor said, hugging her warmly. "How is our grandson?" Mrs. Eleanor had accepted Mary immediately, perhaps by maternal instinct recognizing another mother. Mr. Joe was more reserved but polite. "He's good, Mrs. Eleanor. Do you want to hold him?" John Peter was passed from lap to lap, clearly comfortable with all the attention. He was a sociable child, used to being the center of his small universe. Tom arrived shortly after, looking sharp in a new button-down shirt and a carefully wrapped gift. "Tom," Carlos greeted him warmly. "Carlos, Mary!" Tom kissed Mary on the cheek. "Where's the birthday boy?" The introductions were interesting. Tom conversed naturally with everyone, telling funny stories about his new co-workers without mentioning a word about his time on the street. Mrs. Eleanor adored him immediately. "What a polite man," she whispered to Mary. "Where did you meet him?" "In a difficult time in my life," Mary replied diplomatically. Dr. Henry arrived in the middle of the afternoon when the party was already lively. He brought a medical gift, a complete infant first aid kit. "For the most careful mother I know," he said, handing it to Mary. "I'm not," Mary began, but she stopped. "You're not what?" Dr. Henry asked. "Nothing. Thanks for the gift." It was time to sing happy birthday and everyone gathered around the table. Carlos held John Peter while Mary lit the #1 candle. "Happy birthday to you. We wish you happy birthday," everyone sang. John Peter clapped and tried to grab the candle. Mary held his little hands and helped him blow. She actually blew for him. "Make a wish, John Peter," Mrs. Eleanor said. "He doesn't understand yet, Mum," Paula laughed. "I'll make a wish for him," Mary said spontaneously. She closed her eyes for a moment. "That he grows up happy, healthy, and surrounded by love." "Amen," Mrs. Eleanor said. "And that his family stays together," Mr. Joe added, looking meaningfully at Carlos and Mary. After the cake, while John Peter played on the floor with his new gifts, the adults chatted in the living room. "Carlos," Paula pulled her brother aside, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure. Do you two intend to make this official?" "Make what official?" "Come on, Carlos. You live together, you're raising a child together, she's clearly in love with both of you. It looks like a family." Carlos looked at Mary, who was sitting on the floor with John Peter, putting together a big puzzle. "It's complicated, Paula." "Why is it complicated?" "You like her, she likes you. She doesn't trust me, and she has reasons not to. But she came back. She came back for John Peter." Paula watched him for a moment. "Carlos, have you told her how you feel?" "How? Have you told her you love her?" The question took him by surprise. No. "Why?" "Because I don't know if I love her or if it's gratitude for taking care of John Peter." Paula shook her head. "Brother, you've always been terrible at understanding your own feelings." On the other side of the living room, Mrs. Eleanor was talking to Mary. "Dear, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor. Do you consider John Peter your son?" Mary stopped playing and looked at the child. "It's hard to answer that." "Why?" "Because he's not biologically mine, and I don't want to overstep my bounds." "Mary, have you seen how he reacts when you go away from him?" It was true. John Peter would cry when Mary left, even if it was just to go to the grocery store. And the first word he said wasn't Dada or Mama, it was Maya, his version of Mary. "He sees me as a mother," Mary admitted in a low voice. "And do you see him as a son?" Mary looked at John Peter, who had stopped playing and was looking at her with that smile that melted her heart. "Yes," she whispered. "I love him as if he were my own." "Then he is yours, dear. Love makes a family, not blood." Mary felt tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor. Now answer me one more thing. Do you love my son?" The question took her completely by surprise. "Mrs. Eleanor, it's a simple question, Mary. Do you love Carlos?" Mary looked across the living room, where Carlos was talking to Paula. He felt her gaze and smiled at her, that smile she had learned to recognize as genuine. She began, and then stopped. "It's complicated. Love is always complicated, dear, but it's usually worth it." The party ended late in the afternoon, with John Peter asleep on Tom's lap while the adults finished cleaning up. "It was a perfect day," Carlos said, putting away the last dishes. "Yes, it was," Mary nodded. "He seemed happy." "And you? Were you happy?" Mary thought about Mrs. Eleanor's question, about Paula's words, about the way everyone had treated the day like a real family celebration. "Yes," she said. "I was happy." "That's good." They were silent for a moment, watching John Peter sleep. "Carlos?" "Yes?" "Thank you for insisting on the party. You were right. He deserved a celebration. We all deserved a celebration. Why? Because we've made it this far. Together. Mary smiled. Together, she repeated, and for the first time in months, the word didn't sound strange. The call came on a Thursday morning, while Mary was feeding John Peter breakfast. "Mary, this is Dr. Miller from the family court." Mary's heart stopped. "Hello, Dr. Miller. I need to talk to you and Carlos. We've received an anonymous complaint about John Peter's custody situation." "What kind of complaint?" "I prefer not to discuss it over the phone. Can you come in this afternoon?" Mary hung up with trembling hands. Carlos had left early for a meeting, but she called him immediately. "Carlos, you have to come home. Now." "What's wrong? Is John Peter okay?" "John Peter's fine, but someone has reported us to the family court." 2 hours later, they were sitting in Dr. Miller's office, an experienced social worker who had handled adoption cases in the family. "We've received a complaint alleging that there's an irregular situation in your house," she began directly. "According to the complainant, Mary is exercising unauthorized motherhood over John Peter, and there's a suspicious cohabitation between the two of you." "Suspicious cohabitation?" Carlos asked. "The complaint suggests that you have an undeclared intimate relationship and that this is creating confusion about each of your roles in the child's life." Mary felt the blood run cold. "Who made the complaint?" "It's anonymous, but—" Dr. Miller hesitated. "There are specific details about the house routine that suggest the complainant has close access to information." "Someone who knows us," Carlos murmured. "We need to do an evaluation of the situation," Dr. Miller continued. "I'm going to send a social worker for an unscheduled home visit next week." "And if she finds a problem?" Mary asked, her voice trembling. "Well, John Peter doesn't have a definitive legal custody document yet. Carlos is the biological father, but Mary—" She looked at Mary with a serious expression. "Mary has no legal rights over the child." "But she's been taking care of him for almost a year," Carlos protested. "That doesn't matter legally, Carlos. In the eyes of the law, Mary is an employee. If the evaluation suggests there's confusion of roles or an inappropriate situation, we might have to take protective measures." "What measures?" Mary asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. "Removal of the child until the situation is regularized." The silence that followed was deafening. "Is there any way to regularize this?" Carlos asked. "You could get married," Dr. Miller said objectively, "or Mary could start an adoption process. But both options take time, and the complaint forces our hand." Leaving the courthouse, Mary and Carlos walked to the car in silence. Only when they got in the vehicle did Mary speak. "It was Mark." "How do you know?" "The details about our routine. Only someone who knows our intimate history could know those things, and he threatened me when he was at the house." Carlos hit the steering wheel with his fist. "That son of a—" "Carlos, what if they take John Peter?" "They won't take him." "How can you be sure?" Carlos looked at her, and Mary saw something she had never seen in his eyes before. Real fear. "Because I won't let it happen," he said. But his voice didn't sound as convincing as his words. At home, they found John Peter playing in the playpen, with the temporary nanny Carlos had hired to cover the hours when Mary couldn't be there. "Maya!" John Peter shouted when he saw Mary, holding out his little arms. She picked him up and hugged him tightly, inhaling the baby smell that had become her favorite perfume. "We need to talk," Carlos said after the nanny left. They sat in the living room with John Peter playing on the floor between them. "If they really come to evaluate our situation," Carlos began, "what are they going to find? They'll find a man and a woman who live in the same house and care for a child together. And is that a problem?" "It is, if they think it's confusing for John Peter. If they think I'm trying to pass myself off as his mother without legal authorization." Carlos was silent for a moment. "Mary, do you want to be John Peter's legal mother?" The question hung in the air. I'm afraid to answer that." "Why?" "Because if I say yes, maybe you'll think I'm trying to take him from you. And if I say no, maybe it's a lie." Carlos moved closer to her on the couch. "Mary, answer honestly. Do you want to be John Peter's legal mother?" She looked at the child who was playing peacefully, completely oblivious to the conversation that would determine his future. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." "Then we're going to make it happen." "How?" Carlos took a deep breath. "By getting married." "No." "Why not?" "Because a marriage of convenience is exactly what they'll think it is if we do it now, and because—" She hesitated. "Because what?" "Because I deserve more than that. And so do you." Carlos looked at her for a long moment. "Mary, can I ask you a question?" "Yes." "Do you love me?" The question that Mrs. Eleanor had asked at the birthday party came back to haunt her. Carlos, it's a simple question. Do you love me? Mary looked at him, at the man who had made a terrible mistake, who had apologized in every possible way, who had become a present and dedicated father, who had defended her from her ex-husband. Yes, she said in a low voice. I love you. And I love you too. Since when? Since I first saw you taking care of my son. But it took me a while to understand it was love, not gratitude. They stared at each other, and Mary felt that something was changing between them. A barrier that had been there for months was finally coming down. Then maybe, she said slowly, maybe a marriage wouldn't just be for convenience. Maybe not. John Peter chose that moment to crawl toward them and try to climb onto the couch. Carlos helped him, placing him between the two of them. What do you think, John Peter? Mary asked. Should Mommy and Daddy get married? John Peter clapped and laughed, as if he knew exactly what it was all about. I think he approves, Carlos said. I think so too. Mary? Yes? Will you marry me? For the right reasons? For the right reasons. Mary smiled, tears in her eyes. Yes, I will. And when they kissed, with John Peter between them clapping, Mary finally understood that sometimes the strangest families are the most perfect. Tom, are you sure you want to do this on a Thursday at City Hall with just 2 witnesses? The justice of the peace looked at Mary and Carlos as if they were crazy. We're in a hurry, Carlos explained diplomatically, adjusting his tie. He was wearing a simple but elegant suit. Mary wore a navy blue dress she had bought at a department store. No white, no excessive romanticism. They were adults making a practical decision that also happened to be romantic. John Peter was on Tom's lap, one of the witnesses, in a little formal suit and playing with a rattle that was making too much noise for the solemn atmosphere. And who's the other witness? The judge asked. Dr. Henry came running in, still in his scrubs. Sorry I'm late, I had an emergency at the hospital. Doctor, John Peter held out his little arms to him, as he had become a familiar figure in the child's life. Hi, champ! Daddy and Mommy are getting married, aren't they? It was the first time anyone had referred to Mary as John Peter's Mommy in front of strangers. She felt a thrill of emotion. All right, shall we begin? The judge asked, looking at his watch. The ceremony was simple. There was no music, no decoration, no excited guests, just 2 people who loved each other, after much suffering, promising to build a life together. Carlos Williams, do you take Mary Sullivan to be your wife? I do. Mary Sullivan, do you take Carlos Williams to be your husband? Mary looked at Carlos, then at John Peter, who was trying to eat the rattle. I do. Have you prepared personal vows? They looked at each other. We haven't prepared any, Carlos said. Can I improvise? Mary asked. The judge nodded. Mary turned to Carlos, taking his hands. Carlos, when we met, neither of us was at our best. You had lost your wife, I had lost my son. We both made bad decisions, we hurt each other, and we almost lost the most precious thing between us. Carlos squeezed her hands. But we also learned that love isn't perfect, that families aren't perfect, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the most painful places. She looked at John Peter. I promise to love you, respect you, and build a strange but true family with you. Carlos smiled. Mary, you taught me that being a father isn't just about biology, that being a family isn't just about tradition. You saved my son when I couldn't, and you saved me when I didn't deserve it. His voice broke a little. I promise to never again let fear or prejudice get in the way of us. I promise to defend you, support you, and love you and John Peter for the rest of my life. Very well, the judge said, visibly moved. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was soft, almost shy. It wasn't a romantic movie kiss, but a kiss of 2 people who knew exactly what they had been through to get there. John Peter chose that moment to throw the rattle on the floor with a loud noise, making everyone laugh. I think he approves, Dr. Henry said. He definitely approves, Tom nodded. Leaving City Hall, they went directly to family court, where Dr. Miller was waiting for them with the adoption papers. Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Williams, she said with a smile. Now we can regularize John Peter's situation. How long will it take? Mary asked. With you 2 married, the process is simpler. A few weeks, maybe a month. And the complaint? Well, now that you have a legal union, there's no basis for the accusations. The case has been filed away. Outside the building, Carlos started the car and looked at Mary. Mrs. Williams, he said as a test. I'm still getting used to it, she admitted. Do you regret it? No, do you? Not at all. John Peter, strapped into his car seat in the back, started to fuss. Someone's hungry, Mary said. Let's go home for lunch, Carlos suggested. Our home, Mary corrected. Our home. When they arrived, there was a surprise waiting for them. Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Joe, Paula, and Richard were at the door with a cake and balloons. "Surprise!" Paula yelled when they got out of the car. "How did you find out?" Carlos asked. "Did you think you were going to get married in secret?" Mrs. Eleanor said, hugging Mary. "Tom called me." Tom gave a sly smile. "I thought you deserved a little party." "You're crazy," Mary said, but she was smiling. "Crazy about you," Mrs. Eleanor said. "Now give me my grandson so Grandma can congratulate him." They went into the house, which was now officially both of theirs, and improvised a wedding party. Paula had made sandwiches, Mrs. Eleanor had brought the cake, Richard bought champagne, and even Dr. Henry stayed for lunch. "A toast," Tom said, raising his cup of soda. He didn't drink alcohol. "To the strangest and most beautiful family I know." "To the Williams family," Carlos said. "To our family," Mary added. They clinked glasses and John Peter clapped as if he understood perfectly what was going on. Later, after everyone had left, Mary was in the kitchen washing dishes when Carlos came up behind her and hugged her. "How do you feel, Mrs. Williams?" "Happy," she answered without hesitation. "For the first time in a long time, completely happy. Even without a honeymoon, without a big party, without a wedding dress." Mary turned in his arms. "Carlos, our story has never been about perfect things. It's been about true things. And this right here," she gestured to the house, to John Peter playing in the living room, to the two of them. "This is the truest thing I've ever lived." He kissed her, more deeply this time, and Mary felt that she was finally home. "Hey," Carlos said when they separated. "I love you." "I love you too." "Maya, Dada," John Peter yelled from the living room, missing the attention. "He's calling us," Mary laughed. "Our family," Carlos said. "Our strange and perfect family," Mary nodded. And when they went to the living room to find John Peter, who had spread toys everywhere and was waiting for them with a toothless grin, Mary knew she had arrived exactly where she was always meant to be, home, with her family, finally. "Maya, Dada, look!" John Peter, now 2 years old, ran unsteadily through the garden of the house, holding a flower he had pulled from Mrs. Eleanor's flower bed. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Mary said, getting up from the table where she was having breakfast with Carlos. "But do you remember that Grandma told you not to pull the flowers?" "Sorry," John Peter said in his still slightly muddled voice, offering the flower to Mary. "For you. Thank you, little one." It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the house was full of life. Mrs. Eleanor had spent the week with them, helping to take care of the garden and John Peter, while Mary started an online pedagogy course. "He talks much better," Carlos observed, pouring them more coffee. "The pediatrician said he's advanced for his age, a 3-year-old's vocabulary. He gets his intelligence from his father," Carlos joked. "And the stubbornness too," Mary retorted, laughing. They had found a comfortable routine over the last year. Carlos was still working, but now he made sure to be present for all of John Peter's important meals and rituals. Mary had enrolled in the pedagogy course after realizing that her true passion was early childhood education. "Are you sure you want to work with other children too?" Carlos had asked her when she mentioned the idea. "I have enough love for it," she simply replied. Mrs. Eleanor came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mary, dear, you have to see this." She was holding an official letter. Mary felt her stomach clench. Official letters still made her nervous, even a year after all the legal issues had been resolved. "It's from the family court," Mrs. Eleanor said with a smile. "The adoption has been finalized. It arrived today." Mary took the letter with trembling hands and read it. There it was in official paper. "Mary Williams is recognized as the legal mother of John Peter Williams, with all inherent rights and responsibilities." "Legal mother," she murmured, the words coming out like a prayer. Carlos came closer and read over her shoulder. "Now it's official," he said, kissing her on the temple. "It was always official in my heart," Mary replied, wiping away her tears. "But it's good to have it on paper, too." John Peter, oblivious to the importance of the moment, was still playing in the garden, now trying to catch a butterfly. "Do you know what this means?" Carlos asked. "What?" "It means that if anyone tries to gossip about our family again, we have the legal backing to send them packing." Mary laughed out loud. "Carlos Williams, what kind of language is that in front of your mother-in-law?" "Don't worry, son. I'd send them packing too." Mary's phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Mary? This is Sandra from 2B. Mary winced. Sandra, the gossiping neighbor, rarely called, and when she did, it usually wasn't good news. "Hi, Sandra. Look, I know our relationship hasn't been the best in the past, but I need to tell you something. What's wrong? Mark is downstairs in the building. He says he came to claim his rights over John Peter. He's making a scene with the doorman. Mary felt the blood run cold. Is he there now? Yes. And he's drunk, Mary. He says you stole his son and he's going to get him back. But John Peter isn't his son. I know, but he says you two were married when you got pregnant, so technically... Mary hung up and ran to Carlos. Mark is downstairs, drunk. He says he has rights over John Peter. Carlos immediately became serious. He has no rights. John Peter isn't his son. But we were married when I first got pregnant. He could try to claim... Mary, calm down. Breathe. Carlos held her by the shoulders. He can't do anything. John Peter is my biological son. You're the legal mother now. Mark has absolutely no rights. But what if he... Nothing's going to happen. I'll go down and handle it. I'm coming with you. Mary, I'm coming with you, Carlos. I'm tired of running from Mark. They left John Peter with Mrs. Eleanor and went down together. In the building's lobby, they found a small crowd of onlookers, and Mark gesticulating excitedly at the doorman. I have rights. That woman was my wife. The son she lost was mine. And now she's found a substitute, and she's playing house. Mark, Mary said, approaching with Carlos at her side. Mark turned, his eyes red from drinking. Ah, look, the happy family. The rich man, the opportunist, and the rental baby. You're drunk, Carlos said calmly. Leave before I call the police. The police? I should call the police. This woman abandoned our marriage, lost our son due to negligence, and now she's passing herself off as your son's mother. Our son died because those things happen, Mary said, her voice firm despite the tears. Not from negligence, and you weren't there to support me when I needed you most. I couldn't handle your neuroses anymore. My neuroses? I was grieving, Mark. Sandra and other neighbors approached, clearly on Mary's side now. Mark, you're making a fool of yourself, Sandra said. Everyone here knows that Mary is a wonderful mother to John Peter. You don't know anything. She's obsessed with babies. She always has been. And you're obsessed with drinking, Carlos said. The difference is that her obsession builds families. Yours destroys them. Mark lunged toward Carlos, but he was so drunk that he tripped over his own feet. I'm going to prove they're a sham. I'm going to prove this child is being manipulated. With what proof? Mary asked, stepping forward. With what authority? You are nothing to John Peter, Mark. You never have been. You never will be. I was your husband when I got pregnant with another baby, who died, who has nothing to do with John Peter, Mary yelled. Stop trying to use my pain to justify your envy. The doorman came closer. Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, do you want me to call the police? Call them, Carlos said. He's disturbing the peace and making threats. Mark seemed to realize he had lost the battle. You'll regret this, he mumbled, staggering toward the street. That fantasy will end one day, Mary. And when it ends, you'll remember what you lost with me. What I lost with you, Mary said loud enough for him to hear, was time, and I don't intend to lose another second. Mark limped away, and the small crowd gradually dispersed. Wow, Sandra said. He's much worse than I imagined. Thanks for letting me know, Mary said. You're welcome. We may have had our differences in the past, but now you're our neighbor. And a good neighbor. Walking back up to the house, Carlos asked her, How are you? Relieved, Mary said. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of him. I didn't feel small next to him. Why? Because now I know who I am. I'm Mary Williams, mother of John Peter, wife of Carlos, student of pedagogy. I'm no longer the broken woman he abandoned. Carlos stopped in the elevator and kissed her. I love you, Mary Williams. I love you too, Carlos Williams. When they got home, they found John Peter asleep on Mrs. Eleanor's lap, who was humming softly. How did it go? She asked in a whisper. Resolved, Carlos said. Forever. Mary came closer and stroked John Peter's hair. My son, she murmured. My little son. They were words she had said thousands of times before, but now they had a different weight. Legal, official, permanent. Do you know what I'm thinking? Carlos said. What? That maybe it's time to think about giving John Peter a sibling. Mary looked at him, surprised. Are you serious? Serious? Do you want to? Mary looked at a sleeping John Peter, at a smiling Carlos, at Mrs. Eleanor, who was nodding in approval. I do, she said. I really do. Then let's make our family grow a little more. A big, strange family. Mary laughed. The best family of all. Carlos nodded. 6 months later, Mary would find out she was pregnant. John Peter would have a little sister who would be born at home in a calm birth, surrounded by love and anticipation. He would call her Baby Maya until he learned to pronounce her name correctly, Anna, in tribute to the biological mother he never knew, but who would always be remembered with affection. Tom would become the official godfather of both children. Dr. Henry would remain the family's pediatrician. Mrs. Eleanor and Mr. Joe would move to New York to be closer to their grandchildren. Sandra and the other neighbors would become genuine friends with Mary. Rosanna would get a job at a daycare on the outskirts, where she would discover her true calling, caring for children who truly needed her. Mark would disappear from the story, as bitter people often do when they realize they can no longer hurt those who chose to be happy. Count Mary, at 28 years old, would finally understand that families are not made only of blood or legal documents. They are made of daily choices, of unconditional love, of second chances, and of people who decide to stay when things get difficult. In the Upper East Side mansion that was now truly a home, on the tree-lined streets of New York that witnessed her fall and her rebirth, in the strange and perfect story that began with a baby's cry and ended with a family's laughter, Mary found her peace. It wasn't a perfect peace. Nothing in her life was perfect, but it was a real peace, built on a solid foundation of genuine love, recovered trust, and renewed hope. And when, years later, someone asked her how she had built such a beautiful family from so much suffering, she would simply reply, "One choice at a time, one day at a time, one child at a time." Because in the end, that's how the best stories are written, not with perfect endings, but with brave beginnings. And Mary Williams' mother, wife, student, and survivor had become a specialist in brave beginnings.